is my podcast, The Bloody Vegans. You're very welcome to it. Each week, I'll be travelling ever deeper into the world of veganism, discovering along the way a multitude of viewpoints from the political and ethical to the practical. I'll be doing this through a series of conversations, each aiming to further illuminate my understanding and hopefully yours of all things plant-centric. So this week, I'm going to be chatting with Matt Turner, the Media and PR Officer for the Vegan Society. The Vegan Society is the oldest organisation of its kind and is actually the organisation that coined the term vegan in the first place, which is kind of hard to believe now. It's a term we're so accustomed to, but the origin of it was from the original Vegan Society. So a real kind of OG in the game, if you like, the Vegan Society, and for many of us has been an incredible resource, whether it be transitioning into veganism or indeed maintaining the lifestyle and learning more as we go. So Matt is, as I said, a media and PR officer with an incredible career in politics. Matt and I discuss how he transitioned from an omnivorous diet to vegetarianism, then to veganism, and how he then aligned his daily work with those beliefs that he'd developed through veganism. It's an incredible story. Matt's a lovely chap, and great to hear from the Vegan Society as well. So without further ado, here's a conversation between me and Matt Turner from the original Vegan Society. So Matt, it'd be great to just kick off with a little bit of your kind of personal journey into the world of veganism. Where did it all get started for you?
Well, I actually became a vegan. It was probably about a couple of years ago now. I was introduced to it through my partner at the time. I was a vegetarian before, but she opted to become a vegan, and obviously we spent a lot of time together. And even then, you know, as a vegetarian, I thought it'd be common courtesy to be a vegan when I was around her and when we were going out for food or drinks. And I naturally kind of came into it that way. I actually found it easier than I think a lot of people do. Maybe, you know, going from being a meat and dairy to going straight to be a vegan, I actually found it quite straightforward. Now, I wasn't really that big on cheese and dairy anyway, so I did almost kind of fall into it, and it's honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made, particularly for my own personal health and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you, for many people, they sort of, I think about people who are kind of live an omnivorous sort of lifestyle. They seem fairly comfortable with the switch to vegetarianism, or at least, if they're curious, vegetarianism seems something that they would feel comfortable with. But the cheese, the milk, the kind of the dairy is often seen as a bit of a stumbling block. Was it one for you, or did you find it quite straightforward?
I was lucky in the sense that wasn't really a stumbling block. You know, I've spoken to a lot of friends anecdotally who still say, look, you know, Matt, I would really, really struggle with the cheese and the milk. Although I do think that narrative is changing slightly. You know, I think vegan cheeses are getting better and better as the months go on, and you know, plant-based milks like almond milk and now are increasingly popular and being served in, you know, pretty much any coffee shop up and down the country. So I think, you know, there's never been a better time to take the plunge in that respect. I just think I was very lucky in that, you know, even when I was a vegetarian, I didn't consume an awful lot of cheese and dairy outright. It was more it being a smaller ingredient in a more kind of convenience food based product.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you, did you sort of utilize the resources of the Vegan Society when you were in that transitioning process yourself? I'm just intrigued as to where your sort of first point of contact with the Vegan Society itself was.
Yeah, 100%. You know, the Vegan Society's website is and always has been, you know, a really, really fantastic resource for anybody who's looking to start their vegan journey. You know, it contains loads of recipes, loads of tips and tricks, and loads of kind of support and guidance along the way. I would hazard a guess to say it's probably the best resource out there for anybody who's either interested in becoming a vegan or somebody who is already making the plunge. and would like some more support along their journey. I think it is the ultimate resource in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And what point did you kind of you wind up in the position you are now, where you're sort of representing the society?
It is a dream gig. It's absolutely fantastic to be here acting as a spokesperson for the society. I did kind of fall into the job in one respect. I used to do communications and public relations in the world of politics. Obviously, we had the general election in 2019, and I was an election casualty in the sense that if your boss loses their seat, then you lose your job. It was just divine timing. But at the same time, the Vegan Society were kind of looking for somebody to come in and act as that media officer and act as that spokesman for a cause that I was already really, really passionate about. I must admit, I wasn't really involved in vegan activism so much, simply because I was just, politically working all the time, and I didn't really feel like I had the headspace to kind of join in with other activist circles. But it's something that I've always been passionate about. Ever since I adopted veganism a couple of years ago, and even prior with regards to the rights of non-human animals when I was a vegetarian as well. So for me to be here, even talking to you now, is it's a fantastic opportunity for me.
And have you found the two worlds kind of quite vastly different? I would imagine they would be, and the sort of the messaging must be fairly different to your prior world.
I think it's one of my favourite things about being in this world now. To be honest with you, it's such a positive, really, really positive movement to be a part of. When you're engaging with the press and you're launching campaigns, all of it is incredibly positive about, the kind of benefits of being a part of what is now, the fastest growing lifestyle movement in the UK. It's all about what veganism can do for yourself, what it can do for the planet, and what it can do for animals as well. And I think that was a real attitude shift in the workplace for me, given that politics is largely negative campaigning. Even though I think myself and people around me who I worked for did our best to wage positive campaigns, it's almost inevitable that you will be dragged into what I call gutter politics at some point. And in this role here, there's absolutely none of that. It's a fantastic grassroots community to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. Like this, like you say, there are so many positives, and the message only seems to be growing, which is a nice thing to be part of, I'm sure. Have you seen? I mean, I appreciate in the last 5 months, it's probably been the oddest transition into a role that anyone could ever have had, with kind of lockdown and COVID, etc. I'm kind of intrigued as to whether there's been any correlation from your perspective so far in terms of the general public's attitude towards veganism. Is there more interest in the society, more traffic to the site, etc., more communication since? And if so, what do you think's driving that?
Well, yeah, it's certainly been an interesting start to a new role. I think I spent about 6 weeks in the office, and then we were all working from home. So, I've spent more time working for the society from my kitchen than I have in the actual office, which, time's gone so quickly. It's been an incredibly bizarre time for everybody, I'm sure. I think, but when it comes to interest in veganism over lockdown, there's some really interesting data which suggests that more and more people are beginning to try these plant-based alternatives over meat and dairy products. So we commissioned a consumer survey to try and determine what people's buying behaviours were, especially at the beginning of lockdown. And what it suggested was that 1 in 5 Brits have cut down on their meat and dairy consumption during the lockdown period. And to me, I don't necessarily see it as surprising. I think after the unprecedented success of veganuary and the kind of swaves of new vegan products hitting the shelves in recent months, I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that many consumers have made the switch to plant-based alternatives during the COVID-19 pandemic, whether that be for convenience or cost, or just simply concern for their own well-being, the environment, and the rights of animals.
I was gonna ask that. What your perspective on why that is? Because I can think of a few reasons but they are complete guesswork. You're be far more informed than I. But the reasons I would have thought would be, like you say. I mean, I think at the beginning, perhaps there was even a touch of, uh, vegan milk, for example, is often a long life product. Easier to get hold of, maybe. That kind of thing. Is that the sort of the trend you're seeing, or is there a link? Do you think with this kind of idea of the source of the virus and zoonotics, or would you say that it's not quite that cut and dried one way or the other?
Well, I think the kind of data from our survey at least showed three main strands behind why people are opting for these plant-based alternatives instead of meat or dairy products. And the first one was actually that their preferred product wasn't on the shelves at the time, especially during the supply chain issues at the start of lockdown. We also had the desire to improve the rights of animals, the environment, or their own health, and lastly, the cost of meat and dairy produce as well. That last one I think is particularly important simply because some corners of the media seem to think that veganism is an unaffordable lifestyle for many, but the reality is anything but. Swapping out mince for lentils or chickpeas, for example, or choosing fresh veg over meat produce is actually rather cost effective and doesn't sacrifice flavour. And I think, especially at a time where many people are working from home, I think people have more time to cook and more time to experiment. And I think consumers are starting to cotton on to that fact that actually it doesn't sacrifice flavour and you don't need to sacrifice anything by cutting meat and dairy out of your diet.
I think you struck upon something there that's really kind of interesting around this connection where people are at home more and have had more time to cook. Because it just, I was away last week with some family, and some of the members of the family were non-vegan, don't directly live with me, and we decided, or they had actually, which was kind of very nice of them, to go vegan for the week with our family because we were sort of we were staying together, and there was a debate ensued, as you can imagine it would do, sort of about the fact that vegan products were very expensive, and to be quite honest, we hadn't done ourselves any favors because what we'd done in order to sort of tempt people into it who were omnivorous folk who enjoyed eating meat, etc. Particularly with kids, there was a lot of substitute meat products and uh, famous brands of ice cream who've got vegan alternatives now, etc. So we hadn't made it the Whole Foods plant based, the kind of lentils, the chickpeas, the lower cost. As we all know, it's an easier way to and a cheaper way to be vegan. But my question, I guess, and what I'd love your perspective on is: do you think the sort of the rise of the vegan substitutes, if you like, which is fantastic for all of us, but sometimes do come at a premium? Do you think that's doing more harm than good, or do you think ultimately is a very good thing for the movement?
I think judging how many people now start their vegan journey by doing like for like switches, I think it's an incredibly important innovation, even if it does come at a slightly higher cost. I think the most popular products that people have tried over lockdown are these vegan alternatives to meat, such as vegan sausages and vegan burgers, as well as this array of plant-based milks such as soy milk, almond milk, and oat milk. And I think what is really important for us as a movement now, and what that data illustrates, is that people are really looking for an easy, convenient, like-for-like switch. And I think we can safely say that they're really liking what they've tried as well. So I think it is a wholly positive thing. And of course, you can do it cheaper. But at the same time, many people who encounter those products now may have bought the more expensive organic meat because they were concerned about welfare standards, but they've decided to completely scrap that and go for a pack of vegan burgers or some vegan sausages that are completely cruelty free, and they're really liking what they've tried. So I think it can only be viewed through a positive lens.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think even if it is a sort of a gateway into the lifestyle, through firstly the diet and then this kind of idea of straight substitution. I think I can only speak for myself, but generally speaking, it's led to those products becoming great, but in their place within the sort of weekly shop, as opposed to kind of the only thing that we'd eat. And so, I think our cooking skills generally have probably improved. Do you think, as we sort of rightly or wrongly in various areas of the country are going back to a sort of normal of sorts, and therefore the kind of the pressure on time, convenience, etc., is kind of more required? Do you think there is a danger that we sort of lose this momentum in the community, and how do we go about combating that in your view?
Well, in my view, that was almost the most interesting part of the survey that we commissioned. It was the fact that so many of our respondents were actually liking what they're buying, to the extent that they actually told us they would commit to keeping these products in their shopping baskets when we return to more normal times. Now, again, the most popular products were the meat alternatives and plant-based milks, and half of those who've tried these for the first time over lockdown have all said that they'd continue buying them afterwards. So I understand what you're saying, but what may have started off as a temporary need could very, very easily become a permanent shopping habit, which could only be a positive thing. So I think with the momentum already behind veganism as a lifestyle, like I said, record-breaking Veganuary. I'm sure we'll have another record-breaking Veganuary in 2021. I think, this data is really encouraging, and it's only going to propel us as a movement even further forwards in the coming months and the coming years.
Yeah, I think you're no doubt right, and I really hope we do manage to get some folks to commit to those switches, like you say. I think hopefully that data is proven correct. I'm sure it will be. I'm interested in at this present moment, social media, etc. There are a million different ways to communicate a particular message, and within the sort of vegan community there are so many varied and many opinions on what the right way to get the messaging across is. And I'm just intrigued, as the Vegan Society, certainly in my perspective, you mentioned it as well, like it's often the first place you go to when you're considering veganism, trying to understand what it is. I mean, if we look at even the sort of probably the most quoted definition is the one taken straight from the Vegan Society website. Do you feel a sort of that there is a real sense of almost pressure, if you like, or at least a responsibility on the Vegan Society to sort of help lead the messaging for us all? Because I think in these social media times, we've sort of all become our own sort of PR arm for veganism generally. We all get asked so many questions, and we always want to put across the movement in such a great positive light because it is so positive. Would you say that the Vegan Society has that role?
I'd say, given the following that we have, it does bring an immediate responsibility to almost be kind of a beacon of light for not only vegan activists, but kind of outreach as well, bringing people on board and winning over hearts and minds. And we're really, really lucky in the sense that as the people who coined the word vegan in 1994, that we are able to bring that message out to so many people, hundreds of thousands a week. When it comes to vegan activists, I think social media, it's an absolutely brilliant tool. Whether it be delicious, beautifully arranged vegan recipes being shared, or some funny memes, or some really, high level vegan athletes proving that you can be fit and healthy on a plant-based diet. Vegans have been making a really amazing use of these platforms to help spread the message to the masses. So, although we do have our role to play, being a national charity and a national organisation, everybody has their role to play as well. It's a really, it's an inspiring collective action. If you look at platforms like Instagram, for example, they've helped millions of people see veganism for what it really is, which is a compassion-driven attempt to live, an ethical, sustainable, and healthy lifestyle without contributing to animal suffering. And not only that, but these platforms have really helped expose the reality of the animal farming industries that have always almost relied on secrecy. And what it does is it really enables vegans to connect with others and help them understand why being vegan is an imperative.
Absolutely. You touched upon something there about this sort of this responsibility of everybody, and sort of social media giving this platform, I guess, for information that was generally um, quite purposefully um, hidden, if you like, from the general population, whether it be kind of the juxtaposition of the image that we see on the side of the milk truck versus the reality of the dairy industry. Would you say that there is, and I suppose there are other organisations who do this, but would you say that the Vegan Society's role typically, as an organisation that doesn't necessarily share some of those more negative sides, but points out some of the more positive sides, to your point about there's sort of many types of activism and lots of different responsibilities, do you definitely see that there's a place for that kind of activism, the showing of the shocking image, etc.?
I think, shock tactics can work particularly well. At the Vegan Society, it's not something that we do. But for example, I imagine that an organisation like PETA probably would. I think, as an educational charity, we're always interested in making, a really positive case for veganism. But I do think that the realities, the very stark realities of animal agriculture, do need to be exposed in some way or form. And the impact of social media on that, it just it's social media is designed in a way where things which are shareable will go viral immediately. And whether non-vegans engage with the actual post or not, what you will see is something called accidental exposure. So whether they engage with the post or not, it will appear on their timeline, and that video will autoplay for all of 5 seconds. Now it's their choice whether they decide to stop and look at it. But the reach of, whether it be a positive case and a viral post about, veganism being the best possible thing you could do to, try and solve the climate crisis, or on the flip side, some really kind of harrowing footage from a factory farm, both have the capability to reach people who, as a society and as individuals, we wouldn't usually reach.
Yeah, I think that's probably the view that I would take, is that they've all got a place, and all resonate with somebody, and therefore kind of are all potentially relevant forms of activism. I'm definitely with you from the Vegan Society perspective on. I think once you've discovered that, once you've made the discovery about whether it's the dairy industry or what happens to male chicks, or bycatch in the oceans, etc. I think once you've made that, you sort of then do need to go somewhere to find out, well, what do I actually do with this information? And that's been the place that, that's where I've seen the Vegan Society be a place, certainly for me and many others, to sort of go to next. What do I now do? And that is a far more positive, engaging sort of story once you've discovered that truth, if you like.
Yeah, I think the strategy which we adopt is designed to win over hearts and minds, and I think we do that quite effectively. I mean, if I take myself as a personal example, one of my main reasons for becoming a vegan in the first place was the environment and my own personal health, and I later came into the ethical side of veganism. And if people ask me why I'm a vegan now, that is the issue I would focus on, because it's one which I am now. I would consider that the primary reason that I am vegan. And I'd probably say to somebody, being vegan is the single most effective way in which you can protest the exploitation of animals everywhere 3 times a day. When you sit down for a meal, you're making a really powerful stance against animal abuse. But that's something that even I've grown into, in the relatively short time that I've been a vegan and a vegetarian as well. And I think, I don't know, I think it's everybody has their own journey, and everybody decides what to post on social media and what arguments to make for veganism. But we've always been very clear, at least, that we really should be making a positive case about what people can do to improve the lives and the rights of non-human animals, as well as the planet and potentially your own personal health too.
Yeah, most certainly. I'd love to get into a couple of other bits. One of the ones that I wanted to talk to you about actually, whilst I've got some time with you, is the sort of the vegan trademark, and the weight that sort of that carries, and sort of where did that kind of come about, and what are the, in broad strokes, what are the kind of standards that are required in order to get that vegan trademark? Because I know for many vegans, particularly people who are new to the community, it is seen as a real sort of hallmark of trust. And I think without it, there is always a bit of distrust in a product as to whether it's, it is that, actually, it actually does have all of the animal products that you'd expect removed from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly something which I relied upon when I first went vegan, when I wasn't even working for the Vegan Society itself. The trademark has been around since 1990, and it really is the official, internationally recognised. I would call it a gold standard for labelling vegan products. The trademark, it registers food, cosmetics, household cleaners, and more. And it actually appears on, around thereabouts 45,000 products spanning over 1,000 companies. It's recognised across the world. Actually, about 75% of the business coming in for the vegan trademark is from companies based outside the UK. Which I find really fascinating. I think I actually see it on more products. In a bygone era where we could go travelling, I would see it more actually going abroad. I think it's really encouraging. I think, like you said, for people who are actually new and starting out, it is a really, really helpful guide. And it really will help people along that journey and kind of finding foods which they might not be too sure about because they don't know about this E number or that E number. And I think it just does bring about that peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's really interesting. When you would connect it to the rise of the sort of the vegan convenience products, the meats, etc. Have you seen particularly some of the bigger companies who perhaps haven't had much of a contact with the Vegan Society before, reaching out for that gold standard of accreditation to the society?
Absolutely. I think that the kind of number of products we've registered, I don't have the specific number to hand at the moment, but there was actually an article in The Guardian maybe a week or two ago about the huge spike in registrations for vegan trademarks, so not just ours, but others as well. So many different companies want to register their products with these trademarks. I think one which particularly springs to mind for us anyways is actually fashion products. So New Look released a new range of faux leather bags, and every single one of them were registered with the Vegan Society. And it was absolutely amazing to kind of go in there, and I just went to have a look for myself. Just see this huge range of aisles which otherwise would have been occupied by leather bags maybe 5 or 10 years ago, to be now occupied with trademarked vegan friendly fashion items. And that was really, really encouraging to see. I think it's a real sign of the times.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it's really interesting when you think about. I appreciate that some of these won't have necessarily been certified by the Vegan Society yet, but I was having this discussion with somebody the other day, and it's just interesting. You talk about handbags there, and the conversation I was having was related to car interiors, and how there is certainly a shift, I think, in the perception of what luxury is. And I think, there was almost certainly you couldn't buy any kind of high-end vehicle without it having leather seats. Almost, it was what they just had as a kind of hallmark of their luxury. Similarly with handbags, it would always be about it being genuine leather and so on. And there seems to be, I think it's a really encouraging trend that there's a shift away from that. And actually, people are far more interested in the ethics of those products than they are the perceived luxury.
Yeah, 100%. I think people, as consumers, are becoming more and more conscious of what they are consuming. and whether that be food, fashion, cars, and even if it's not for ethical reasons, even if it is simply for environmental reasons, everybody is what I would like to say beginning their vegan journey. That they are really conscious of the impact that the exploitation of animals is having on the planet, and they may not be joining all of the dots right now, but to me, even that buying behaviour is a really positive step in the right direction.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I think it's, to some degree, even if it is people seeing the word and then it triggering something later, them googling the vegan society, finding out a little bit more, I think it can even have that power there, like you say, even with people who weren't necessarily considering it, but something triggered as, oh, this is a more ethical choice. I'd love to move into this the discussion point around farming, actually, because I've got a bit of a I've had many a discussion with various folks over the course of time about farming and one of the things that I think is often sort of cast at members of the vegan community is that they're almost anti-farming by some notion, that they're often don't understand kind of rural life or country life, etc., and are anti-farmer. And I think I've even heard that within the vegan community, people sort of outwardly anyway being quite anti-farming. And I watched a while back and was lucky enough to have him on the podcast, the director of this film, but watched the film 73 Cows some time ago, directed by Alex Lockwood, and he spoke about the fact that Jay and Katia Wild, who were beef farmers, and could no longer cope with what they were doing. They'd sort of had a real ethical awakening over the course of a decade, actually, sought support from the Vegan Society in order to help them switch their farm to one that was essentially veganic. And I'm interested in that sort of angle. That was something before that film I didn't even realize the Vegan Society got involved with. What's the scale of that kind of project? Is it something you're seeing more commonplace? And then I suppose it'd be good to get some view on where the Vegan Society feels the role of the farmer is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we are seeing changes like that more so. I mean, it's still relatively rare, but it's now happening on a grassroots level and a corporate level as well. I think, can't quote me on this, but I did think that I read somewhere that the oat milk brand Oatly actually bought an entire dairy farm, simply to turn it into an oat farm. And that, as far as I was concerned, from a public relations point of view, it was absolutely fantastic to see. On when it comes to working with farmers, I've always been quite passionate about this, simply because not my parents, but my grandparents certainly. We did come from a farming family, and I've had many discussions about this with my granddad over Christmas dinner. His is usually a turkey, and mine is usually a vegan alternative. And I do always say to him, the Vegan Society has never wanted conflict with farmers. We've always been very keen to collaborate and advocate for policies that actually help farmers transition to a more sustainable and kinder system. I think in any industry, or in pretty much any movement or social group, there is a resistance to change when practices have been quite similar for such a long time. But what I do always say is that consumer demand for plant-based food is rising rapidly, and this presents a real opportunity for British farmers, and we want to see them benefit as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a really great point you make, that the Vegan Society and I think generally speaking, I can't speak for everybody, but certainly my perspective would be, I don't think being vegan is necessarily by definition anti-farmer. I think quite the opposite in many ways. Whilst we all want to probably see an end to animal agriculture, I think calories are required, for society to exist, and growing of crops is exactly what we need. We just need farmers to do something different. Like you say, old habits can die very hard, especially when they are central to communities, and so I think it's amazing work that the Vegan Society is getting involved in that space.
Yeah, and it is important that we do recognise that there are some farmers out there who do feel threatened. They feel that their livelihoods are under attack. But when it does come to actually sitting down and having a conversation, we do often find that some of the policies that we would like to propose, they would probably agree with. For example, we'd want to see greater education around the environmental and economic benefits of pulse production, as well as subsidies to be directed more towards these kind of protein-based arable crops than animal protein. And almost, crucially as well, a package of financial support for farmers willing to transition out of animal farming. And I think when you talk about a threat to livelihood, I almost feel like that is, in the long run at least, particularly the way that the market is shifting and the demand for plant-based goods is shifting, I actually think it could well revive a lot of livelihoods in the farming industry. But at the same time, I do understand their concern on like a basic human level, being concerned about their income. But as I said before, I think our Grow Green campaign and our Grow Green package, which we will continue to lobby for in Parliament, is an absolutely fantastic way to help farmers transition out of animal farming altogether.
Talking of that, because I'm definitely intrigued your perspective, specifically being somebody who's mixed in both worlds, whether it be the political or now the sort of the world of veganism. It seems to me, I think you've come into veganism for a similar route. I certainly came into veganism from the place of cowspiracy was the first thing that sort of triggered my interest. And I went, down the rabbit hole of then reading some of the source material and the reference points for that film, and I got a sense of, just as the sort of name of the film suggests, there's a stark reality here that's being hidden from the vast majority of us as to the impact of, I think you said it earlier, of the impact you can have through 3 times a day sitting at your table on the environment and the health of our planet. Do you feel, and in fact I had this conversation with somebody who's not vegan the other week, who said, if this was the case, if what you're telling me was the case, then the government would have said something about it. They would be mandating everyone to eat vegan. Do you think we are anywhere near a government being comfortable enough to even get close to that kind of messaging, or talk about things in those terms? Or do you just think there's too much at stake in terms of sponsors and financial influence, etc.?
I don't think we're close to this particular government saying that, but at the same time, I think they don't do that for a variety of reasons. But particularly, I'm just putting my political cap on here. I'd probably say that these are my own views as somebody who has analysed politics before. That the kind of rural voter base for this particular government means that this current government would not say something like that. They would be annoying a lot of their core constituency. But as a society, we're not necessarily focused on the sound bites which politicians come out with, but the actual research behind what we're saying. And that's why we have the confidence to say it, even when many governments and many politicians won't. The reality of the situation, instead of sloganeering or sound bites or political influence, is that farming animals waste a lot of food, water and land, because farm animals eat much more food than they, quote unquote, produce. Eating meat, dairy and eggs is an incredibly inefficient and callous way of getting calories, as we receive probably only about 40 calories for every 100 calories we feed to farmed animals in crops like soy. So a 2018 Oxford University study, probably the most comprehensive analysis, at least to date, of the damage animal farming does to the planet, found that a vegan diet really is the single most effective way as an individual to reduce our environmental footprint, to the extent where the researcher himself went vegan because he could not find a more sustainable way of farming animals. And there's no denying that what we eat has a huge impact on climate change and the natural environment, and the kind of global animal farming industry creates more greenhouse gases than probably, actually, I think that is the case, that the whole transport sector combined. It's responsible for, over 90% of Amazon degradation. And this is all evidence-based work which has been carried out and that we talk about for a reason, because like I said, it's not sound bites, it's not sloganeering, it's not political lobbying. These are, stone cold facts at the end of the day. And this is what truly, in my view anyway, convinces people to make that switch, as well as these, documentaries which shine a light on this in probably a more eloquent way than I am right now. I remember watching them all on Netflix when I first got involved, and it really gave me that kind of motivating push that I needed, I think. And when you do, I think, it's a strange word to use, but it's almost like a rabbit hole. You start and you keep on researching and you keep on going down, and you start to realize that actually something is being kept from us somewhere down the line. Otherwise, a lot more people and a lot more governments would be advocating for the kind of policy we're advocating.
So from the society's point of view, because I'm with you on all those subjects, and I think it's up to us in the vegan community to try and illuminate those facts. And like you say, I think they're very difficult to argue with when they've been time and time again backed up statistically and empirically. Do you kind of see the route forward for us then, kind of a mixture of sharing that information while still, I guess, making sure that the message is palatable and people are in the right place to hear it? Because I think that's going back to our point about some forms of activism being probably a more stark message than others, and there's a place for some of those, but sometimes people just aren't in the place to hear it. Do you think there's a bit of a balance of we have to deliver the facts, but we also have to politic to some extent and play that game too?
I think there is a really fine balance, but I do also think there is a common misconception about veganism, and that notion is that we are all these angry, militant animal rights activists. And as much as we are animal rights activists, I would contradict the idea that we are all very angry and very militant in that regard. I hope that we'll be able to get rid of what is a misleading stereotype, in my view, that people will start seeing us for who we are, which is, passionate, kind people who simply want to stop animal suffering in the world. And I think we do achieve that by being patient and kind and understanding of non-vegans. It's obvious that we have more than one reason to be angry at a world where animals are treated as commodities the way that they are, but we also shouldn't direct that anger at those who are part of the system, and instead work hard to really open these hearts and minds. When it kind of comes to working in the more political sphere, the Vegan Society do regularly attend the party conferences. Actually, when I was working in the political world, I went to an event hosted by the Vegan Society, and that was a couple of years ago, I think, at the party conference, the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. And I didn't think sitting there that 2 years later I'd be working with some of the people who were talking that day. And I think, from what I gather anyway, we're not going to have party conference season this season, this September even, simply because of the coronavirus restrictions. But from what I gather, speaking to staff about previous conferences, it's always very well received. The arguments that we make, the stance that we take, it's always very well received by politicians. But at the end of the day, I'd like to see actions instead of words about the work that we're doing. I'd like to see them actually act on some of the recommendations that we make and publicly support them. But I think that does come with time. As public opinion changes and more people become vegan, or at the very least adopt a plant-based diet, it's going to be imperative on on the politicians and the media to really start clocking on about the change that's happening in the world. The number of vegans has quadrupled over the past 5 years, and it is being discussed more and more on talk shows, and we're demanding more and more newspaper columns and newspaper inches as days go by. And I think soon enough, the actual politicians will start to cotton on to what is going to be the future normal.
Yeah, I hope you're right with that, and I think that
I am an optimist, Jim. I am an optimist.
Well, I think it's probably the only stance to take that is that is productive. Like I do swing back and forth with this one myself, in terms of, when you think about the number of when we've got an election cycle coming up, and exactly like you say, this government certainly isn't going to do anything to impinge or put a barrier up on its hold on the rural vote, and that often relates to farmers and pro hunt lobbyists and all kinds of people. So but I am also with you on the fact that I'm encouraged by the numbers of vegans growing, the sort of the various methods of activism. I think moving us. I'm reluctant to say away from the sort of angry vegan, because I think there's a place for that too, but into a place that's probably a little bit more palatable. And then I think that gives us a good platform to get our voice across. And it's incredibly encouraging to hear that the Vegan Society is at those party conferences and is listened to, because I think that's really reassuring.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, we encourage meaningful dialogue with everybody, and it doesn't matter what political stripe you are. We would like to engage with you about what we believe in and what we are passionate about. And many vegans passionately, share the message about the benefits of our lifestyle. And there are so many forms of vegan advocacy. And we do try and almost adopt a catch-all approach. We're talking to people in politics, in the media, education. Our campaigns are very wide-ranging. It could be about cost or affordability. It could be about CO2 emissions in the environment. It could be about your own personal health. And a campaign which we are launching in September, which I'm really, really excited about, is almost bringing it back to the roots of the ethics behind veganism and kind of where it all began, and what changed, and what the future normal, what the new normal could truly look like. So I'm really, really excited to launch that. I can't, say everything about it right now, but please do keep an eye out for it. Launching on the first week of September.
This idea, and obviously I won't push you to say too much about the sort of the future project, but what we can see in September. But this idea, I think, of sort of going back to the roots of it, but also showing what that new normal looks like. I think, like we said earlier, I think is a very special place that the Vegan Society holds, insofar as once you've gone down the rabbit hole and you've heard the information, what do you do next? What do you actually do with that information? And I think it's great to see the Vegan Society providing that support and resource once again, and renewing that as we hopefully we've got a lot of people who've had their interest piqued, shall we say, over the course of lockdown.
Yeah, and I think this campaign is really trying to hone in on that, in that we want to create a place where people can rediscover how amazing our relationship with animals can be, and how to kind of create that change in our everyday lives. I think there is a desire out there to hit a restart button, and I think, like every social change, when it arrives, we wonder how normal could have ever been described about what went on before. We do know that we can create a kinder future for animals, and these kind of campaigns, well, hopefully we can inspire some, what I would call, light bulb moments among people who love animals but are yet to kind of take that step into veganism lifestyle. That's what I'm really, really hoping we can achieve with this campaign.
That's awesome. Awesome. Really looking forward to seeing that in September. For those who don't know, what's the best way to go about if you either want to support the Vegan Society or find out a little bit more about what it is that you guys do?
Well, yeah, as I think as we've covered before, our website is an absolutely fantastic resource for anybody who's interested in starting their vegan journey, or is after some new recipes or something to kind of help them along the way. It's full of great blogs, great recipes, great content. When it comes to joining, of course, we'd love you to join the Vegan Society and be a part of the oldest, the original vegan society.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think one of the things that I came to the Vegan Society for initially and still go to now is sounds simple, but the some of the dietary advice and the supplement advice, because I think when you first become vegan, there's a real kind of like minefield. Everyone's telling you you're going to keel over from some sort of deficiency, and so the sort of the Veg One supplements felt like this isn't a paid sponsorship or anything by any stretch, but is just something that gave me a huge reassurance, coming from the Vegan Society. So I recommend everyone to take a look at those as well.
Yeah, our nutrition page is fantastic. We have an in-house dietitian who's been working on that page and working with the British Dietetic Association to kind of share the message that well-planned vegan diets can support healthy living in people of all ages. And as a resource reading about vegan health, and with our supplement Veg One as well, as you've said, website on the whole, is an absolutely fantastic resource for anybody who really wants to look into nutrition and health.
It really is, and like you say there, I think the key word's well planned. And whether you're vegan or not, I think the average British diet is not particularly well planned. Maybe that's changing, but I think it's probably not. And so I often sort of come back with, when I'm chatting to non-vegans who sort of talk about these deficiencies, etc. We often then get into a conversation about, the average omnivorous diet isn't particularly well thought out nutritionally. There's pitfalls in that too. So to have a resource where you can hear it, hear that resource, read that research, and knowing it's so well thought out and so well researched, I think it's just invaluable. And I think all of sort of certainly society in the UK could, and in most of the West, could do with looking at well planned nutritional advice. Definitely.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Awesome. Well, look, Matt, it's been amazing chatting to you. I'm looking forward to September when the new campaign starts. Recommend everyone to head on to vegansociety.com. Simple as that, and take a look at all of the resources that we talked about today, and many, many more. But thank you for your time, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on. It's been brilliant.